The wind over Agincourt still smells of rain and rust. Beneath the green grass of northern France, bones sleep in silence, thousands of them locked in the same twisted agony that ended their final hour. On October 25th, 1415, St. Crispin's Day, the field ran red and did not stop steaming until nightfall. And some say if you lie still enough, you can still hear the cries. The story begins long before the blood. King Henry V of England had crossed the Channel with dreams of reclaiming lost lands. Normandy, Anjou, the pride of England's medieval crown. He was young, fierce, and hungry for glory. But glory came at a cost. Plague, hunger, exhaustion. His army had marched nearly 250 miles through hostile territory, pursued by a French force 4 times its size. By the time the English reached the small, rain-soaked fields near Agincourt, they were starving. Their clothes clung to their skin with sweat and filth. Their boots rotted away, and many were too weak to lift their swords. Across the mire, the French army glittered with banners, crests, and plate armor, knights and nobles who had spent their lives training for war. To them, this was not a battle. It was a slaughter waiting to happen. They mocked the English from across the field, calling them beggars, archers, peasants. They believed that once their cavalry charged, it would all be over. But Henry, cold and calculating, had chosen the terrain carefully. The field was narrow, flanked by thick woods, with the ground sodden from days of relentless rain. It was the perfect trap. When dawn broke, a thick mist rose from the mud. English archers drove sharpened stakes into the ground, angled toward the enemy's horses. Each man carried a longbow taller than himself, capable of piercing armor from hundreds of yards away. They waited in silence, breath visible in the cold air, fingers trembling on the bowstring. Then Henry gave the order. The first volley darkened the sky. It came like thunder, thousands of arrows slicing the mist in a deadly rain. The French cavalry roared forward, their war horses churning mud beneath hooves. But the earth betrayed them. The heavy steeds sank, stumbled, and collapsed, throwing their riders into the muck. Arrows found gaps in armor, puncturing throats, eyes, joints. Screams echoed through the fog as the mighty charge turned into chaos. Still, more French came. Rows upon rows of knights pressed forward, trampling their own fallen. The crush became unbearable. Men suffocated beneath the weight of their comrades, unable to move or breathe. Those who fell could not rise again. The mud swallowed them whole. The air was thick with steam and blood, and the ground itself seemed alive, pulsing with death. When the French finally reached the English line, what awaited them was not retreat, but rage. The long bowmen, out of arrows, drew their knives, hammers, and hatchets. They smashed through visors and helmets, hacking through flesh and steel. Faces vanished beneath blows, armor dented inward like crushed fruit. The noise was a nightmare of iron and bone. Among the chaos, King Henry fought like a man possessed. Chroniclers say his helmet bore a dent from a French axe, a strike that nearly split his skull. Yet he fought on, drenched in mud and blood, screaming for his men to hold the line. Around him, the French elite, counts, dukes, and barons, fell one by one. And then, suddenly, it was over. The French charge broke, their banners collapsed into the mire. The screams faded to whimpers. The field was a slaughterhouse of mangled flesh and twisted steel. The English had done the impossible. They had annihilated a force 5 times their size. But the horror was far from done. As the English rounded up prisoners, hundreds of French nobles worth fortunes in ransom, a new threat appeared. Rumors spread that fresh French reinforcements were approaching. Henry feared his captives might turn on their guards in the confusion. His decision was swift, brutal, and irrevocable. He ordered every prisoner killed. The command spread like poison through the ranks. Soldiers hesitated, staring at the kneeling men before them. Some pleaded for mercy, promising gold and titles. Others prayed aloud, but Henry's voice cut through the noise. Kill them all. And so began the massacre. English soldiers, trembling but obedient, drew their knives once more. They slit throats, crushed skulls, drove blades through gaps in armor. Blood poured into the mud, mixing with the rain until it ran red again. The field that had already reeked of death now drowned in it. When it was done, the silence was unbearable. The only sounds were the cawing of crows and the drip of rain from broken helmets. Henry stood amid the carnage, his face unreadable. Victory had cost him something that no crown could repay. Night fell. The fog returned, swallowing the field whole. English soldiers built fires and tried not to look at the heaps of bodies that glistened in the flickering light. Some said they saw figures moving in the mist, men without faces, horses without riders. A few swore they heard voices whispering in French, still calling for their mothers. By morning, the field was unrecognizable. The wounded had frozen where they lay, their armor stiff with blood. Horses twitched in death spasms, still tangled in their harnesses. The French nobles who had once feasted in castles now lay half submerged in muck, their jeweled rings stripped from swollen fingers. Henry ordered the burial of a few English dead, but most bodies, especially the French, were left to rot. The local villagers refused to come near. The stench carried for miles. Dogs and wolves prowled the field at night, gnawing at bones that gleamed pale under the moonlight. For generations afterward, peasants said the land was cursed. Crops withered where blood had soaked deepest. Travelers claimed to hear the rattle of armor and distant cries on misty mornings. Some refused to pass Agincourt after dark. They said it belonged to the dead. Centuries later, archaeologists would find bones there, hundreds of them, buried hastily, sometimes headless, often shattered. The soil itself bore traces of iron, remnants of rusted armor dissolved into the earth. Even now, when storms roll over northern France, lightning strikes often find that same patch of ground, as if drawn to the echo of what once happened there. The Battle of Agincourt became legend. Shakespeare turned it into poetry. Kings turned it into myth. But strip away the glory, and what remains is something far more human and far more haunting. It is the sound of men choking in mud. It is the sight of comrades slaughtering captives because fear left no room for mercy. What Henry won that day was not merely a victory, but a curse. His triumph secured English pride for a century, but it also sowed the seeds of unending war. The ghosts of Agincourt did not rest. They followed every army that came after, every knight who marched to conquest believing God was on his side. Even now, standing on that quiet farmland, you can feel the unease. The earth feels softer, the air colder. And sometimes, just at dusk, when the mist creeps low and the world holds its breath, you can almost hear it. The faint whistle of an arrow, the low moan of a dying night, the steady rhythm of rain washing the sins of men into the soil. Would you have stood there, ankle-deep in mud, watching comrades drown beside you? Would you have obeyed when ordered to kill the helpless? Or would you have hesitated just long enough to become one more ghost among the fallen? The field of Agincourt is silent now, but silence is only the surface. Beneath it lies centuries of agony, pride, and regret. The dead have no language left, only echoes. And tonight, as you drift into sleep, listen closely. You might just hear them whisper your name. If this story haunts you, let it. History remembers the victors, but the ghosts remember everything. Stay for the next tale. The past is full of screams the wind still carries,